morning. Thank you for joining me today. So, today we are going to do Genesis chapter 37, verse 1 through chapter 38, verse 30. But Jacob lived in the land where his father had stayed, in the land of Canaan. This is the account of Jacob. Joseph, his 17-year-old son, was taking care of the flocks with his brothers. Now he is a youngster working with the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah, his father's wives. Joseph brought back a bad report about them to their father. Now Israel loved Joseph more than all his sons, because he was a son born to him late in life, and he made a special tunic for him. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father loved him more than any of them, they hated Joseph, and were not able to speak to him kindly. Joseph had a dream, and when he told his brothers about it, they hated him even more. He said to them, "Listen to this dream I had. There we were, binding sheaves of grain in the middle of the field. Suddenly, my sheaf rose up and stood upright, and your sheaves surrounded my sheaf and bowed down to it." Then his brothers asked him, "Do you really think you will rule over us or have dominion over us?" They hated him even more because of his dream and because of what he had said. Then he had another dream and told it to his brothers. "Look," he said, "I had another dream. The sun, the moon, and 11 stars were bowing down to me." When he told his father and his brothers, his father rebuked him, saying, What is this dream that you had? Will I, your mother, and your brothers really come and bow down to you?" His brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept in mind what Joseph said. When his brothers had gone to graze their father's flocks near Shechem, Israel said to Joseph, "Your brothers are grazing the flocks near Shechem. Come, I will send you to them." "I'm ready," Joseph replied. So Jacob said to him, "Go now and check on the welfare of your brothers and of the flocks, and bring me word." So Jacob sent him from the valley of Hebron. When Joseph reached Shechem, a man found him wandering in the field. So the man asked him, "What are you looking for?" He replied, "I'm looking for my brothers. Please tell me where they are grazing their flocks." The man said, "They left this area, for I heard them say, 'Let's go to Dothan.'" So Joseph went after his brothers and found them at Dothan. Now Joseph's brothers saw him from a distance, and before he reached them, they plotted to kill him. They said to one another, "Here comes this master of dreams. Come now, let's kill him, throw him into one of the cisterns, and then say the wild animal ate him. Then we'll see how his dreams turn out." When Reuben heard this, he rescued Joseph from their hands, saying, "Let's not take his life." Reuben continued, "Don't shed blood. Throw him into the cistern that is here in the wilderness, but don't lay a hand on him." Reuben said this so he could rescue Joseph from them and take him back to his father. When Joseph reached his brothers, they stripped him of his tunic, the special tunic that he wore. Then they took him and threw him into the cistern. Now the cistern was empty. There was no water in it. When they sat down to eat their food, they looked up and saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead. Their camels were carrying spices, balm, and myrrh down to Egypt. Then Judah said to his brothers, "What profit is there if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites, but let's not lay a hand on him, for after all, he is our brother, our own flesh." His brothers agreed. So when the Midianite merchants passed by, Joseph's brothers pulled him out of the cistern and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver. The Ishmaelites then took Joseph to Egypt. Later, Reuben returned to the cistern to find that Joseph was not in it. He tore his clothes, returned to his brothers, and said, "The boy isn't there, and where can I go?" So they took Joseph's tunic, killed a young goat, and dipped the tunic in the blood. Then they brought the special tunic to their father and said, "We found this. Determine now whether it is your son's tunic or not." He recognized it and exclaimed, "It is my son's tunic. A wild animal has eaten him. Joseph has surely been torn to pieces." Then Jacob tore his clothes, put on sackcloth, and mourned for his son many days. All his sons and daughters stood by him to console him, But he refused to be consoled. No, he said, I will go to the grave mourning my son. So Joseph's father wept for him. Now in Egypt, the Midianites sold Joseph to Potiphar, one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard. At that time, Judah left his brothers and stayed with an Adullamite man named Hira. There, Judah saw the daughter of a Canaanite man named Shua. Judah acquired her as a wife and had marital relations with her. She became pregnant and had a son. Judah named him She became pregnant again and had another son, whom she named Onan. Then she had another son, whom she named Shelah. She gave birth to him in Kezib. Judah acquired a wife for his firstborn. Her name was Tamar. But Judah's firstborn, was evil in the Lord's sight, so the Lord killed him. Then Judah said to Onan, have sexual relations with your brother's wife, and fulfill the daughter of a brother-in-law. Fill the duty of a brother-in-law to her, so that you may raise up descendants for your brother. But Onan knew that the child would not be considered his own. So whenever he had sexual relations with his brother's wife, he withdrew prematurely so as not to give his brother a descendant. What he did was evil in the Lord's sight, so the Lord killed him too. Then Judah said to his daughter-in-law Tamar, live as a widow in your father's house until Shelah my son grows up, for he thought, I don't want him to die like his brothers. So Tamar went and lived in her father's house. After some time, Judah's wife, the daughter of Shua, died. After Judah was consoled, he left for Timnah to visit his sheep shearers, along with his friend Hira, the Adullamite. Tamar was told, look, your father-in-law is going up to Timnah to shear his sheep. So she removed her widow's clothes and covered herself with a veil. She wrapped herself and sat at the entrance to Enaim, which was on the way to Timnah. She did this because she saw that she had not been given to Shelah as a wife, even though he had now grown up. When Judah saw her, he thought she was a prostitute, because she had covered her face. He turned aside to her along the road and said, come on, I want to have sex with you. He did not realize it was his daughter-in-law. She asked, what will you give me in exchange for having sex with you? He replied, I'll send you a young goat from the flock. She asked, will you give me a pledge until you send it? He said, what pledge should I give you? She replied, your seal, your cord, and the staff that's in your hand. So he gave them to her and had sex with her. She became pregnant by him. She left immediately, removed her veil, and put on her widow's clothes. Then Judah had his friend Hira, the Adullamite, take a young goat to get back from the woman the items he had given in pledge, but Hira could not find her. He asked the men who were there, where's the cult prostitute who was at Enaim by the road? But they replied, there has been no cult prostitute here. So he returned to Judah and said, I couldn't find her. Moreover, the men of the place said, there has been no cult prostitute here. Judah said, let her keep the things for herself, otherwise we will appear to be dishonest. I did indeed send this young goat, but you couldn't find her. After 3 months, Judah was told, your daughter-in-law Tamar has turned to prostitution, and as a result, she has become pregnant. Judah said, bring her out, and let her be burned. While they were bringing her out, she sent word to her father-in-law, I am pregnant by the man to whom these belong. Then she said, identify the one to whom the seal, cord, and staff belong. Judah recognized them and said, she is more upright than I am, because I wouldn't give her to Shelah my son. He did not have sexual relations with her again. When it was time for her to give birth, there were twins in her womb. While she was giving birth, one child put out his hand, and the midwife took a scarlet thread and tied it on his hand, saying, this one came out first. But then he drew back his hand, and his brother came out before him. She said, how you have broken out of the womb. So he was named Perez. Afterward, his brother came out, the one who had the scarlet thread on his hand, and he was named Zerah. Whew. Pretty crazy. Nice going, Judah. When you sleep with a prostitute, it's okay, but when she sleeps with someone, it's burn her. Uh, and he doesn't give the third son to Tamar here. Um, because he didn't want him to die like the rest, assuming that the moral character is probably the same as his brothers and and the father. And it's interesting that he immediately assumes that Tamar was a cult prostitute and not just a regular prostitute, um, indicating to me that that was pretty culturally prevalent at the time, cult prostitution. So, also, you had previous to Judah, Abraham, Isaac. You had Jacob and Isaac both going to Aram to get wives for themselves. But doesn't look like there's any of that sort of, oh goodness, care in the case of Jacob's descendants here. Okay, well, let's carry on here. Matthew chapter 12, verses 22 through 45. Then they brought to him a demon-possessed man who was blind and mute. Jesus healed him so that he could speak and see. All the crowds were amazed and said, "Could this one be the son of David?" But when the Pharisees heard this, they said, "He does not cast out demons except by the power of Beelzebub, the ruler of demons." Now when Jesus realized what they were thinking, he said to them, "Every kingdom divided against itself is destroyed, and no town or house divided against itself will stand. So if Satan casts out Satan, he is divided against himself. How then will his kingdom stand? And if I cast out demons by Beelzebul, by whom do your sons cast them out? For this reason they will be your judges. But if I cast out demons by the Spirit of God, then the kingdom of God has already overtaken you. How else can someone enter a strong man's house and steal his property unless he first ties up the strong man? Then he can thoroughly plunder the house. Whoever is not with me is against me, and whoever does not gather with me scatters. For this reason, I tell you, people will be forgiven for every sin and blasphemy, but the blasphemy against the Spirit will not be forgiven. Whoever speaks a word against the Son of Man will be forgiven, but whoever speaks against the Holy Spirit will not be forgiven, either in this age or in the age to come. Make a tree good, and its fruit will be good, or make a tree bad, and its fruit will be bad, for a tree is known by its fruit. Offspring of vipers, how are you able to say anything good since you are evil? For the mouth speaks from what fills the heart. The good person brings good things out of his good treasury, and the evil person brings evil things out of his evil treasury. I tell you that on the day of judgment, people will give an account for every worthless word they speak. For by your words you will be justified, and by your words you will be condemned. Then some of the experts in the law, along with some Pharisees, answered him, "Teacher, we want to see a sign from you." But he answered them, "An evil and adulterous generation asks for a sign, but no sign will be given to it, except the sign of the prophet Jonah. For just as Jonah was in the belly of the huge fish for 3 days and 3 nights, so the Son of Man will be in the heart of the earth for 3 days and 3 nights. The people of Nineveh will stand up at the judgment with this generation and condemn it, because they repented when Jonah preached to them, and now something greater than Jonah is here. The queen of the south will rise up at the judgment with this generation and condemn it, because she came from the ends of the earth to hear the wisdom of Solomon, and now something greater than Solomon is here. When an unclean spirit goes out of a person, it passes through waterless places, looking for rest, but does not find it. Then it says, 'I will return to the home I left.' When it returns, it finds the house empty, swept clean, and put in order. Then it goes and brings with it 7 other spirits, more evil than itself, and they go in and live there. So the last state of that person is worse than the first. It will be that way for this evil generation as well. Yeah. I've heard it put before that we, as human beings, are vessels, and vessels need to be filled by something. And in this case, Jesus was going around casting out demons, but without having God fill that place that the demons occupied before, they just eventually come back worse than ever. I think it's very important to look at Matthew 12, 36 and 37 soberly, and to keep track of what we say. I tell you that on that day of judgment, people will give an account for every worthless word they speak. For by your words you will be justified, and by your words you will be condemned. So, definitely don't let blasphemy escape from your lips. And Jesus also hits on that it's important for the things that come out of our mouth to mean something. Like, he specifically condemns making promises of, oh, yes, I'll do that, I promise. And and he says, no, just let your yes mean yes, and your no mean no, because anything else is from the devil. Okay, carrying on here in Psalm chapter 16, verses 1 through 11. Protect me, O God, for I have taken shelter in you. I say to the Lord, you are the Lord, my only source of well-being. As for God's chosen people who are in the land and the leading officials I admired so much, their troubles multiply. They desire other gods. I will not pour out drink offerings of blood to their gods, nor will I make vows in the name of their gods. Lord, you give me stability and prosperity. You make my future secure. It is as if I have been given fertile fields or received a beautiful tract of land. I will praise the Lord who guides me. Yes, during the night I reflect and learn. I constantly trust in the Lord because he is at my right hand. I will not be upended. So my heart rejoices and I am happy. My life is safe. You will not abandon me to Sheol. You will not allow your faithful followers to see the pit. You lead me in the path of life. I experience absolute joy in your presence. You always give me sheer delight. Awesome. And finally, Proverbs chapter 3, verses 27 through 32. Do not withhold good from those who need it when you have the ability to help. Do not say to your neighbor, go, return tomorrow, and I will give it, when you have it with you at the time. Do not plot evil against your neighbor when he dwells by you unsuspectingly. Do not accuse anyone without legitimate cause, if he has not treated you wrongly. Do not envy a violent man, and do not choose to imitate any of his ways, for one who goes astray is an abomination to the Lord, but he reveals his intimate counsel to the upright. Cool. Well, thank you for joining me today. Appreciate it. Bye.